You are listening to Action Design, your monthly insight into the field of behavioral economics and its applications to the world around us. We bring you leading practitioners from all industries to discuss cutting-edge behavioral research and how to practically apply those concepts to the development of consumer products and public policy.
Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year. Welcome to another episode of Action Design Radio. We are recording this on January 2nd, so this is officially our first podcast of not only the new year, but of the new decade. And joining me for another year and another decade of podcasting is my co-host, Zarak Khan. How are you, Zarak?
I am doing well and excited to be in the second decade of the millennium, is how I would like to think of it.
Yeah. How was your new year and your holiday season?
It was great. It was another where in the world is a rock situation. So I was in New Zealand a couple weeks before Christmas and then spent Christmas there. My sister is kind of sort of a vagabond and travels the world. And so we try to meet up a couple times a year in different places, but she's been kind of on the road for like years now. And so she had been in New Zealand for a couple months. So we met up there for Christmas with our partners and family. And then I spent a week in Napa and Yosemite. So pretty great holiday season, I would say. How about yourself?
It was great. It was fun, but busy as usual. I was mostly just visiting family, doing kind of the typical stuff. But
any momentous things happen for you?
I did get engaged over the holidays, actually. So that is a new thing. So
breaking action design news.
Breaking action design news recently in the last 72 hours. So you heard it here first.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Very exciting stuff. But on to the main event here. We are really excited to have a good friend of Action Design's here to join us and kick off the new year and the new decade of Action Design podcasting. And we have David Nyo with us today. And David's a good friend of the Action Design community, previously ran the Action Design San Francisco chapter, if I remember correctly, and has a very awesome background in what he calls behavior design. So he was the first graduate of the behavior design program at Stanford and actually created the program, which we will discuss more in a little while. While he was there, he was a member of BJ Fogg's famous Persuasive Technology Lab. And currently, he's the founder of Behavior Delta, which helps teams do behavior-driven design and research and work that effectively and ethically to facilitate positive change in people's lives. So, David, welcome to the show.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me, y'all.
We're excited to have you. So why don't we start, and why don't you just give us a little bit more background on yourself and what you do in behavior design?
When I was younger, geeked out on just applied practical psychology. I'm talking about when middle school time, just geeking out on that. When I found out the power of mnemonics and memory palaces and major systems or microfacial expressions, it was just blew my mind. And that really started this journey of practical psychology. But I never really knew how to bridge the two of my love for practical psych to this world of designing things, whether it's hardware, wearables, or mobile or web type of products to facilitate positive behavior change until I met my dear mentor, BJ, in 2010. So, a decade later, applying behavior design really under his, learning from him, working alongside him, some other things that weren't mentioned. Now that BJ's new Tiny Habits book is out, we'll be able to focus on the behavior design content that we've been writing over the years and bring that to more of the public in the upcoming years as well. But I'd be remiss to say if I didn't include BJ's new book, which we'll be able to include some of that into our content today. But currently right now, the behavior designer in residence at the Peace Innovation Lab at Stanford, which they're all about, how can we bring more people together across boundaries, whether it's gender boundaries or literally conflict zone boundaries, or whether it's demographics, etc. So that's really aligned as well. And then, of course, I run Behavior Delta, which is a behavior design consulting firm. A lot of our work translates into design deliverable work or research work, usually solving problems around activation or retention in the product world, or adherence, right, or compliance in the medical world. But really, it's about, we want people that we're serving to do certain positive behaviors because it's going to lead to a healthier, happier life, but they're just not doing them. How can we design the solution, tweak the solution so that we can positively facilitate that change in their lives? And so, yeah, we can geek out on so many things, but there's just a little bit more context there.
That's interesting, the distinction that you made just then of like design a solution versus tweak a solution. How often do you feel like you're kind of creating something from whole cloth versus there's like a pretty good solution that's out there and you're kind of like it's like a final mile sort of problem and you're tweaking something to make sure that it has the uptake that's required or the habits that are required to sort of persist with it or something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really depends on what the client is asking. One example that we can link to as a case study is published on the Peace Innovation Lab blog at Stanford around the work that I was doing with cybersecurity and employee behavior change. So this client, he was already in the cybersecurity business, but he wanted to create a new program from idea, right? So it didn't exist before, and applying behavior design and you going through the process and facilitating change and actually getting people to change, so that really there's two behaviors. Don't click on the phishing link, and also the more positive behavior, which is, hey, report the fish that you see. And can we get people to do that? Because unfortunately, the industry standard, I never knew anything about cybersecurity, so this was all learned on the job. The standard, unfortunately, is, at the end of the year, if you're working for a big financial firm or something like that, you have to literally go through the process and just like click through videos to be compliant, right? And check the box. That doesn't really, as we all know, facilitate the actual habit and discernment of, oh my God, this is fake information right here, and I should not click on this, and I should report it. So I think we can share some links at the end or maybe in the description. So hopefully we can share that as a case study. But that's an example of going from idea to actual program. And then another example might be HeartMath. They've been in business for like 30 years. They're both mobile and wearable. And that's another example of intercepting, hey, like, we're trying to continue to evolve and improve our experience, and we want to do something new, but on top of something that exists. So how might we do that? So it really ranges.
Gotcha.
I personally love playing with going from idea, nothing exists, to something that works and does.
Well, and I don't know if this is taking us too far down a rabbit hole, but I think I'd like to explore it for at least a few minutes. But how does that come to fruition in the work that you're doing in conflict zones? Like when you talk about like designing something to bring people together in a space that's typically designed to keep people apart, I never thought about that before. So I'm curious to learn more about kind of what your approach is there, or the things that you're trying, the things that you've seen successful, but even kind of the impetus for this in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. So I have less experience here, but the Peace Innovation Lab, this is like their focus. Not specifically in conflict zones, though that's a subcategory, but really what they're about with peace behaviors is defined as pro-social behaviors. And that actually just simply means bringing people together to interact, whether you're cooking, right? Whether you're just Zooming across a conflict zone with people that that usually won't interact with. One of their case studies is the Peace Project at Facebook, where like during wartime, the friendship requests and acceptances during wartime still continue to increase on Facebook during these conflict zones. And so, Facebook gets a lot of heat, right, for for various reasons, but in a way, it does successfully bring people together in certain scenarios, and that was one of the scenarios. There's a like I think it's like peace.facebook.com, where the results and the cases are shared there. But really, what we're designing for in terms of conflict zones or in terms of peace or any boundaries is how might we bring people together and interact on a repeatedly basis.
That's really interesting. I mean, it came up just over the holidays with some of the folks that I was spending time with, just because, you know, sometimes you're close with, you end up interacting with distant relatives and people that you don't see that often, but you kind of have a
Right.
regular cadence of maybe annually, and obviously it's a much less heated or charged environment than an actual war zone. But I think some people go into it sort of feeling like they're kind of preparing themselves for battle, But we were talking about the value of kind of having those interactions and conversations
Right.
with people who are different from you or have different opinions or different experiences, and how do you do that in a positive way? And obviously in this case it's sort of like the mechanism is already there to kind of force you to come together, which is, well, they're your family and it's the holidays, or there is some kind of bond there that already exists. But then within that, how do you kind of structure those interactions so that they're positive and fruitful and bring people closer together, and then hopefully that becomes a virtuous cycle and you enjoy seeing those people more and you want to spend more time with them and that sort of
Right.
thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just riffing on this, we're going off a little bit off of our
Yeah.
pre-scheduled agenda, but I think
As tends to happen. Yeah.
yeah, I love it. I think this lands and connects with a lot of folks. We just heard this story. We spent like a very chill New Year's Eve with some of our friends here in New York, and they went on this family trip, and with another family friend and their family. So like two families together that have like never really gone on a family trip together. You can imagine the differences of vacationing. So for the one family, the lead family member had a vacationing style of, I researched all the things on Yelp and on TripAdvisor, and here are the top things, and we're going to do all the top things, and we're going to go to the top things. And also, when we're paying for the things, we are going to not split the bill in half, but we are going to basically itemize it for every single person. Now, for some folks, they might hear that and be like, that's exactly what I do, right? Like, that totally makes sense. For other folks, I'm in this camp, it's like, that doesn't make sense. And that's, but I understand that personality type that is inclined to do that. Just connecting this with boundaries or just differences, right? Like, how do we navigate, accept, and perhaps like laugh at, or laugh with or along the experience? I think it comes down to acceptance that, hey, like, there's this person and they're wired in a specific way, and there are gifts here. There are, I don't prefer this, but there are some gifts here that I normally wouldn't do, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the right alchemy of, I mean, and this is, I feel like I'm just leading us farther and farther down a path that's not our intended conversation, but it is interesting because I think about this a lot. I travel all the time. Wrote a piece I guess now last year, on behavioral science and traveling, and I think that it can sometimes work really well to have somebody, but typically only one person, who is like that, and they kind of like sort of take the lead. But a big part of that is like our expectations around like, what's this going to be like, and who's going to be doing what, and what are the different roles here. And if I have a friend who is essentially like an accountant, and is like, when we go, it's not really like a, hey, everyone just like throw your card in, we'll split the bill. It's like that person keeps track of everything. And like, at the end of the day, I guess I don't really mind that. Like, I don't want to do it myself, but, and like, I would happily pay at whatever minor difference it is at the end of the day to just sort of split things, and typically it's pretty even. But if that's really what they want to do, and they're, I mean, like, I'm okay with that. But like, so it can sort of work out if your expectations are kind of set appropriately in the beginning.
Right.
But otherwise, yeah, it can definitely lead to trouble if people are their sort of expectations continue to come in conflict with each other.
Right, right. Yeah, totally. And let's connect this back to the great story narrative that we can kind of build on and connect back to behavior design. We didn't plan that, but I think we can connect it back. Back to this point of expectation. Let's play with that for a little bit. And let's connect it to our individual lives, because it's about, New Year's edition, right? We all have things that we want to either let go of or build into our lives, new or increasing something that already exists. Eric, you shared, you're going to do a triathlon, right, this year, and both of you guys want to write more. So going back to expectations and sharing a behavior design technique, and we can link this as well at the end. This just came out on Monday, so like right before the New Year's. It's with promo for BJ's new Tiny Habits book. Definitely a recommended resource as well. Technique is called the swarm of bees technique, and there's a little snippet in the link that's shared. And this technique here is a way of thinking about behavior, but also a way of designing for the behavior change that you want. And if you imagine a swarm of bees, a lot of bees swarming around something. What are they swarming around it? And if you imagine a cloud in the center, and that cloud is your aspiration. In these cases, the aspiration is, hey, enjoying a vacation. And one of the bees, for your accountant friend, for this, apparent leader of this group, their way of enjoying the behavior that they need to do in order to enjoy this vacation is to, keep track of financially, like very specifically what is happening and who owes what. For others, it's like, they're like, I don't want to know about what the bill is. I don't care. Like, I just want to pay, right? If we're just looking at the financial behaviors, there's tons of behaviors for that aspiration. And again, we can link it at the end, but this is called the swarm of bees technique. Just wanted to drop this little example in because one of the unique parts of behavior design is that it is a new approach of understanding behavior and also methods for designing solutions for positive behavior change. And oftentimes when we talk about behavior, it's not crispy or specific enough. It's not systematic enough. And I think in the behavioral science community, one, in my mind, because I've been in the behavior design field and just applying that approach, one of the differences that I see, not good or bad, just differences, is that in behavior design, we don't immediately go for different cognitive biases and heuristics or principles, or whether it's Cialdini principles, right? Or, looking on the codex and seeing what sticks. It's, hey, let's get the behavior right first. Because if we expect ourselves, let's go to a wellness or like a wellness example. If, living with more well-being in 2020 is one of our aspirations, there's a lot of expectations and shoulds that could be part of the B's, right? Oh, I should meditate. I should run. I should exercise. I should this. I should that. I expect myself to, whether it's conventional wisdom, this or that. But most of those shoulds, like, the person actually doesn't even want to do it. So they're just shoulding all over themselves, and they're wondering, like, why isn't this behavior sticking? No matter what principle you stick on or bias that you're trying to tweak, like, the behavior doesn't stick. Well, in the swarm of bees model, it doesn't matter if that bee doesn't stick on, because there are so many ways for us to experience well-being. Move on to the next one that you're actually excited to do, that you're actually motivated to do, that you're actually able to do for you, and not throw this expectation on yourself or the should on yourself. So this is how I wanted to connect it back to those expectation part that you brought up, Zirak. So swarm of bees technique, behavior design, a new approach of understanding behavior, and also methods for design. So I'll pause there. Let's take us to another rabbit hole, Zirak.
I was going to chime in and say I really like that swarm of bees term, because I think a really key thing is, I know for myself individually, looking at designing my own behaviors, for example, or building new habits and things like that, is that a lot of times when things have not worked is when I've been too committed to like one way of doing it. Exactly. Or like one method. And, we talk a lot in like a lot of our episodes about, we're all about like experimenting and testing things. And I think for, we're talking about we're just starting a new year. We're probably working on new things. A key thing is not to expect yourself to get it right the first time, because we're all very different in how we kind of respond to different incentives, different kind of methods of doing things. And if you have a thing you kind of want to achieve, it's really important to remember that the first thing you try to get it done, like, might not work. And in fact, it probably won't work, but that's not a failure. That's just something you've learned by yourself. And then you kind of move on to the next thing. Because there's so many things where I've gotten a lot better at this over time, where like the example of writing more came up. That's one I've had before, but something I've been working on more recently. And like, for example, maybe there's common advice that like, you should wake up, you should write like first thing in the morning and just like get some like pages down. For a lot of people that probably works, like that works pretty well for me, but it might be better for another person to say like, I'm going to write after lunch, like after I get to meeting and get back in the office, I kind of need to get back in the groove again. Then maybe the morning doesn't work, but that one clicks. So I think that's just an important point to drive home is we're all kind of thinking about what we kind of accomplish in the year is that there's a lot of ways, to use the swarm of bees example, like there's a lot of ways to achieve one thing and you can try a lot of those until you find which one actually sticks.
Right. And let me just build on that and highlight a distinction here, because let's just say one traditional way of thinking that is becoming more and more outdated is, oh, we have this target outcome that's in the cloud, right? And let's just think about in a business setting or in a personal life setting, for more people to use the app or insert personal aspiration here in the center. And we just draw one line, one behavior to that cloud, and we say, this is it. Like they're married, whether it's a company on a company level, you're just married to one way of achieving that outcome. Or, in the writing example, oh, you're only married to writing in the morning, and you're just like trying to force that in. That's the old traditional way. The Swarm of Bees way, and this is BJ's unique work. So again, highlighting his work, it says, hey, there are actually many bees in order to get to that cloud, get to that outcome, get to that aspiration. And only one of them has to really like resonate with you and work. So really then the job becomes, the work becomes, or the play becomes, how quickly can you identify if this is resonating with you or not? Do you feel more alive doing this? Does your team actually want to do this within the company? Are they actually able to do this? Is it actually effective? And if it's not, move on to the next B. Move on to the next behavior. There's plenty of them to get to wellness, right? The well-being, to de-stress, for this, for that. So just wanted to highlight that distinction.
Yeah, and that makes me think too, just to build on it a little bit more. One thing that could be helpful in advance, and I haven't generally done this, so I do this a lot in like business settings where like somebody has a goal of something they want to accomplish, and I have them make a big list of ways that they could achieve that, and then sort of like go back and systematically prioritize those things for testing, essentially. And for some reason, that's very intuitive to me in like a business setting, and that like things aren't necessarily going to work first time. You need to get all your ideas out. You need to like stretch the boundaries of what you think could work and what couldn't. And then you need to kind of prioritize what like intuition, data, whatever it is, tells you might work. For some reason, I've never really thought about that for myself. And that like, I think intuitively, I understand that, all right, here's the thing that I want to do. There's probably a lot of different ways I could do it, but I usually just think of one thing to start with, and then I just do that and kind of see how it goes. I'm just thinking about this like on myself, and that it'd be really helpful to think about whatever your goal is. Like another example could be, I want to meditate more this year. Don't say like, all right, I'm going to try the one thing I'm going to try. Like, even if you have that sort of understanding in mind that there's a lot of ways to do it and you might not get it right first, rather than just picking one thing, which is probably I'll meditate in the morning before I go to work or something like that. It'd be helpful to list out all those different ways you could do it, and then look at those as a whole list of options. And to your point, like see which ones really like jump out to you as just feeling right or feeling like they connect. Because you'll kind of jump onto initially the most obvious thing, which is like, yeah, I should do it in the morning, but maybe the morning doesn't work for you. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing to think about as you're thinking about resolutions, goals, whatever it is here's kind of an outcome you want to drive. What are all the ways you could achieve that? What are all the ways you could do it? And then just start at the ones that feel right, and then kind of move down the list until you find the one that clicks.
Yeah, exactly. What are the specific actions or behaviors that could lead to that same outcome? And the Life Hacker article on the swarm of bees totally illustrates that and more specificity. So listeners definitely check that out. But the premise is still the same, whether it's in business or personal life.
This is maybe kind of a naive question, but what about for things that like essentially like get better over time? Like you enjoy it more, like there's kind of a threshold that you have to hit before you start enjoying it or before you start to feel competent at it.
Yeah.
And
Most of
so
the worthy ones,
what's
most of
that?
the really great ones. Yeah,
Yeah, right. So I mean, there's lots of things, and I think those are the ones that often come to the top of people's minds around this time of year, right? Where
totally,
they're thinking about something that, like, yeah, if I could really get this to stick, this would really kind of change my life.
totally.
And there are people who do these things and enjoy them, and I'm currently not one of those people. But there's got to be some kind of path to that for me. Is it
Yep.
always like, how does that fit in with Swarm of Bees, where like is I mean, in my mind, there might not always be like be a bee that you enjoy doing, right? At least not at first. And so, I mean, you use the word resonates with you, but how do you fit in like the idea of, other kinds of commitment devices or things that would essentially kind of get you over a threshold if whatever your sort of, identified behavior or outcome is something that might take a little bit of time, or sort of unpleasant effort before you kind of get going?
Yeah, totally. Great question. Let's use meditation as an example. Personally, it's changed my life, and I totally know the initial humps, right? This up and down type of experience, roller coaster experience of, oh, it's on, it's off, it's on, it's off, until it's like on one day. Um, and it's one of those experiences of, it kind of sucks in the beginning, right? Like, are you doing it right? Oh, somebody's telling me to like not think thoughts, but how can I not think thoughts? Because I have a brain that actually just its job is to produce thoughts. And so you have all this bad instruction, etc. But let's focus on the actual behavior. um, and we can also group exercise, because I think exercise is also in this camp, because it doesn't feel great until a certain these certain moments, and sometimes it's like it feels like it's out of your control. So introducing the core behavior model, the Fogg behavior model here. For those who don't know what this is, we can link BJ teaching it in 2 minutes or less. But essentially, it explains when a behavior happens and when it doesn't. And behavior happens when three things come together at the same moment: motivation to do the behavior, ability to do the behavior, and a prompt to do the behavior. And the prompt is the thing that says act now. So with meditation in the beginning, just checking in, like audience participation, Eric, Zarak, like, have you guys ever tried meditating, and do you have a practice now, and what does it look like?
I have done it intermittently, but I do not have a consistent practice. I would say it's always been thinking about prompts. It's always been prompted by essentially being like a moment of stress or something like that, where like,
Yep.
I got to do something, like this stress is too much. What should I do? Oh, people meditate when they're stressed out. I'll like download an app or something like that and do it for 30 minutes or something. So it's very much not a practice. It's almost more like there's an acute, you know, need. And
Right.
so I'll just like inject some meditation in here and see if
Right.
that works. And like, I guess I do regularly do some like breathing exercises, but that's the extent of it.
Okay. Okay. Very cool. And Eric.
Yeah, I'll say for me, years ago, I had a really strong habit where I did it quite a bit. I'd usually do it in the morning and then for quite a bit of time, like even like 20, 30 minutes. And these would be a little more focused meditations, like where I'd kind of be focusing on specific things, not as much just the typical like silent, block your mind out kind of thing. I used to do that, then I would do a little bit at night sometimes as well. Then for whatever reason, I just kind of totally like fell off that habit. And recently I've been kind of trying to get back into it. I'd set like a goal and like a habit tracker of just like 5 minutes every day. And I've been trying to just track that. I'd say the other thing, and I try to think of, is like taking a broad view of what meditation is and viewing it as just sort of being in the present for a little bit. So I do try to kind of think about being mindful at random times. So for example, when I'm walking somewhere in the city, rather than put my headphones in and like listen to a podcast, I'll just leave it silent and sort of walk and let my mind wander. So I do kind of focus on mindfulness regularly, but I've been just recently trying to get back into actually like sitting and doing, meditation in the way that we
Right.
tend to define it.
Totally. Perfect answers, because I think we have a different petri dish here. We have, Zarak does it in time of need, but knows where to get it. And then we have Eric, who had a strong practice like this on and off. And then on my end, it's definitely a thing like drinking water for me. Like, it is a must every day. And so different journeys. But the path of getting on here for this practice, for a ritual, for any habit, how many of the things that we do now that we're still doing happened because it consistently sucked. It was just a terrible experience every time. We felt like that we failed every single time. We felt like we didn't do it right every single time. It's not in our life. On the contrary, the things that have stuck, that are good for us, that are healthy for us, helpful for us, is because we had these moments of breakthrough or success, enough of them that they kind of like reinforced, right? So for listeners that don't have a behavior background, if you just think about, something that is pleasant, anything pleasant or pleasurable around a specific habit or behavior, that becomes stronger and more consistent, and the vice versa is also true. Avoiding pain, right, or something that's unpleasant, that'll kind of like just die off naturally. Thus the swarm of bees, there's almost like this pleasantness, unpleasantness kind of score for each one, that's for each person. But coming back to this, because this all connects to, remember, behavior happens when motivation, ability, and prompt, there's enough of it converge at the same moment. B map. The moments of pleasantness, celebration, that pleasure, all connects to the motivation kind of like part of the equation. Now, connecting it to the meditation example, because really the question is like, how do we sustain this in the beginning when it sucks, right? Like, we're not going to feel anything until later on. So how do we facilitate that within ourselves? Let me ask you, Zarok, what happened, and Eric, what do you say to yourself when you realize you didn't meditate?
I guess probably the first thought is like, I'll always have like a reason. Well, yeah, it's because I was on I was on a flight and I was distracted, or I didn't actually. Flight's probably a better place for it, but it's like, oh, it's because I didn't have time today, or I normally would have, but I was doing something else instead. So it's usually, I mean, if I'm like, now I'm trying to kind of relate it back to BMAP. It's usually either because like sort of intrinsic motivation was kind of like low, sort of like flagging there.
Yeah,
Or what's most often is that either there wasn't a consistent prompt for myself, like I didn't set like a scheduled regular time for it, or
right.
like travel thing or something like that. Like my ability to do it was low at that moment.
Right. So Zarok here is already troubleshooting of how he could potentially do it next time. In that moment, though, when you realize, shit, like I didn't meditate, how do you feel? You
Um,
feel great?
no,
You
yeah. I mean,
forgot?
you feel bad. I mean, you feel like you failed at something.
Right. Interesting. Okay, let's take that example as one data point. Eric, what about you? When you realize and you forgot that you forgot to meditate, how do you feel? And what
It's
do you
hard to,
say to yourself?
yeah, it's hard to pin down a feeling. I'd almost say it's a little more slight annoyance. I wouldn't say it's like super frustrating because I probably wouldn't consider it. And this is, you're asking us, I'm thinking about that motivation piece. And I'm not sure I consider it a like big priority as far as habits go. It's something I want to do, but it's almost, if I really dig into it, it's more of a nice to do and not a have to do. So I think it's a little more like, oh, I didn't do that today. Like I'll do it tomorrow. So I don't think
Right.
about it too much. It doesn't bother
Okay.
me too much. And another
Okay.
thing is just because I think the thought process is interesting. That's jumping out to me is like I mentioned before, I do think about kind of mindfulness and like maybe I don't sit and meditate, but I do other things. And something I thought of that I should do is take a broader definition of that. Like, did I take time today to just be present? Like, be connected to myself or disconnected from the world, whether that's a walk, whether that's just like being mindful in the shower, whatever that is. So one thing it's interesting to think of that swarm of bees thing is that there's a lot of ways I can achieve what I want to do is sort of clarify my mind. Like I hadn't really thought of what the goal is with it. I'm like, and when I think about it, it's like I just want to kind of like let my mind wander a little bit, give my brain a break, help it like be a little more focused, less distracted. And there's a lot of different ways I could achieve that in any given day. It doesn't have to be one thing. So I
Right.
just hadn't even really thought of that until now. I'd really focused on I need to sit in my couch, close my eyes, like focus on my breathing for 5 minutes. So that was the goal. And
Yeah.
that's definitely good. I like doing that, but that's not the only way I could succeed in that every day.
Yeah, precisely. I think these are great answers because it gives opportunity for more people to connect with it. Eric, you broadened the scope of like what does meditating mean, right, to get to that outcome. So you gave yourself more chances to succeed. So thus, if you realized that, oh wow, I forgot to meditate, it was just slight annoyance. It still wasn't. It was slight annoyance on the spectrum. And then Zirak, for you, perhaps it was like, oh, there's only one way to succeed in meditation, and it's there's a specific image to that, right? It's like listen to app for 5 minutes and whatnot, as what you brought up. So I think like often most people, they feel bad. They feel like, oh wow, I failed because I only gave myself one way to succeed. Now here's the thing, the mental game to play goes back to your question of how can we feel good along the way until before like the actual benefits of the exercise and meditation comes in. Well, let's say a person's never meditated before, right? And or tried to. And 1 month in, they're on and off. And I actually did this with on the side, I've been running small groups of how can I leverage social accountability to help people change together. And I ran this men's meditation group for a year. Some people never meditated before, some people on and off, some people are like, hey, like this is great, I have a practice, but this will strengthen it. Well, no matter where you're at, sometimes we'll forget that we meditate. So what can we do to enjoy that moment? What can we do to still what can we celebrate in that moment? For the person that's never meditated before, remember, a year ago they've never meditated, but in this moment they realized that they forgot to meditate. That's an amazing thing. A year ago, you would never even have the thought that you forgot to meditate, but now you do. That's phenomenal. And
just the awareness itself is a win. You can think about it.
Can be celebrated.
Yeah.
And that's a huge shift along the way. Today, or yesterday, so I've been, exercising has been it's always been on and off for me, but I've been really feeling it in this past few months. I joined Orange Theory, and it's like really great experience. The group fitness, there's so many different levers that we can unpack there, right? Like what they're doing to help facilitate the motivation and the experience. But the past 2 days, I've taken recovery days, and I've noticed my mind and my body are like, they want to go to Orange Theory, they want to exercise, but I want to also sustain this and make sure I'm not, overdoing anything or get an injury. And then I realized, oh wow, I can celebrate that thought. I can celebrate that feeling of this. If we bring in Charles Duhigg's, habit loop, I think the biggest distinction in my perspective is this anticipation ingredient that really shows if something is connecting or not, that the mind is looking forward to the thing. That's like a signal that, hey, like there's something here and it's really connecting. And so that was the flavor of thought that I celebrated within myself. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Similarly, that thought of forgetting that you meditated or you forgot to exercise, or that like, oh man, like I'm starting to feel bad that I didn't exercise. Oh my God, that's great. Celebrate that, because a year ago you would not have even given it a second thought, So along the way, that's the big takeaway there.
I had never thought about that before, and or never thought of it that way, and I love that. I'm definitely going to start doing that. I'm going to start telling everybody to do this. This is great.
Totally.
It seems like a lot of it's like you need to like shift the emotion associated with it, because a lot of things that we want to do that we don't do just become guilt, and something you just feel like guilt and shame about is kind of hard to get going because you have such a negative feeling to it. So a lot of it's just like shifting. And I know like BJ Fogg, I think, had a example I read forever ago of like, if you want to start flossing, you don't say I'm going to floss every tooth every day. You floss one tooth and then you celebrate the victory, because that's just the easiest barrier to entry. And then you celebrate that you did something. And what that does by starting so small and by celebrating that small thing is you start kind of creating an identity that like, I'm the type of person who flosses, even if it's just one tooth. Like you are doing the thing that you're doing, even if it's not quite at the level you want to do it at. And you're also just shifting that emotion to, this is something that feels good. This is something I'm successful at. So a lot of that is just thinking of like, for the thing you want to do eventually, how can you sort of pare that scope down to the point where, the barrier is low and you can start feeling good about that, just like getting going. For whatever reason, it's so natural to set ourselves up for failure and say like, I want to work out for more for this year. So that means I'm going to work out 1 hour every day. And it's like, you're never going to do that if you're not already working out. But you could do an hour spread throughout the week. You could do an hour one day. Like there's so many ways you can do that, and then eventually build up. And then it's really just a process, and that you need to learn to really enjoy that process and every step of building towards that.
Yeah, totally. Spot on. And that, flossing one tooth example and then celebrating really um, communicates the essence of, BJ's work in Tiny Habits, which is essentially applying behavior design. And he created a program to help people build habits. And the new book, it's called Tiny Habits. I think it's like 20 plus languages. It just came out, I think, on the first. So definitely check that out to unpack, the more practical techniques and strategies there, and all the stories, the success stories there too. But yeah, like that insight of, celebrating the fact that you forgot to meditate was a huge insight that my friend and I had when we were, both trying to build up our meditation practice. That, wow, that can also be celebrated, and not only the destination, right, should be celebrated, but the path and the process as well. And that'll definitely make it more efficient and effective to get to the end outcome as well, whether it's in personal life, right, business, etc. And this whole like shame and guilt and this negative lever, I think we overuse it, especially in Western society, and just tracing those roots back, right, to like the Puritans and like that ideology. I've been looking a lot into systems and questioning assumptions of like what's built into the culture, especially the U.S. And there's definitely like that translates over into, like shaming yourself in order to, make the thing happen. And I think if I had to put like an advance like step out there in the future, it would be, you can play with both levers of playing with, the unpleasant or the pain, and also the pleasantness or the pleasure and the celebration, to use both to succeed. But I think overemphasizing the celebration part, the feeling good part, that part is more than just a lever to build habits, but I think can be, a big mindset shift for folks too. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we often think about like the importance of process, even like in a business context, like process metrics, and not just sort of like the outcome, but like, okay, how do we measure like the inputs here as well? And like this is kind of an interesting way of doing that for yourself. Not that you would necessarily track it, although I guess you could, but like, um, you know, it's essentially kind of like an indicator of maybe like your intrinsic motivation or something like that. Like, well, I'm thinking about this more and I wouldn't have otherwise, and that's like a positive step. And I know that as long as I kind of increase this, it's going to make it more likely, right, that the outcome that I'm looking for is going to occur as well, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, totally. Personally, I've been kind of venturing with the Behavior Design Foundation, where we're focusing more on, observable, right, actions that we can help facilitate and do, and acknowledging that there's like so much invisible stuff that's happening, right? All the subconscious like beliefs and values and mental patterns and emotional patterns, venturing more into that space. And I think this is definitely an insight to practical one, reframing and celebrating even the thought of forgetting, right? Or the anticipation or desire to do can be reinforced. Yeah. And just connecting it, just doing a little quick review, because I'm just mindful of our time here. Some of the things that we chatted about today, Fogg behavior model, which explains, when a behavior happens and when it doesn't. BMAP, behavior happens when motivation, ability, and prompt come together. We'll share a link. The Swarm of Bees technique, share a link, both the BJ's work. Leveraging social accountability, that's definitely a flavor that personally I've been including in the Habit app and tech platform that I'm designing and building on the side, in addition to the consulting firm. And then the final takeaway is, whether it's in a business context or in personal context, whatever the habit or behavior, ritual, practice is, linking it to a higher purpose beyond just yourself, or linking it, just connecting it to a greater thing. I'll give you an example. So this habit group that I run around, just physical health, eating healthier, moving more. 1 month out before Thanksgiving, I asked the group, hey, like, what would you like to experience and feel in 30 days before Thanksgiving? People are saying, I want to be healthier, et cetera, et cetera. And then I asked why. What why. What could you connect it to that's greater than yourself? And for all of us, it was very easy. It's like, oh, I want to be healthy because I can be there for my loved ones, right? I want to be healthy so that I can give an example to my two sons. I want to be healthy because I want to show that my partner that I care about our health. So I think that's the last, tactical takeaway for listeners is to whatever you're working on, link into a higher purpose just beyond yourself, because we can make things simple for sure to help us succeed, and we can also tap into the highest motivation that's there for us possible to help us succeed. We can play with both, and I think playing with both helps us. It just makes it easier, more fun, more effective, more efficient. We don't have to make it extra hard just because.
Yeah, and I really like that point. And I'll cover this quick, and then we'll kind of go into some of our last stuff to wrap up. And I appreciate the run through and everything. But one thing I think of in the motivation part, and like you said, of tying it to a bigger goal, is that I think there's sort of two parts of that. And one, it's important to recognize what your actual motivation is and be honest with yourself. Like getting healthy might just mean you want to look good in the beach this summer. That's perfectly valid as something as a reason, but it might not be enough to carry you through all the hard work to get there. So like recognizing that motivation, being honest with yourself, and then tying that to a greater goal, and that like, well, yeah, I'll look at the beach, but also like I'll be healthier for my family. I'll be able to do more. I'll just feel more energetic every day, so that I can give more at work. I can give more to my family. I think it's important to like recognize the core and then build on that and think about that, is a good way to think about it.
Great.
All right. So that was a great run through. I know we got a couple minutes left. One thing I just wanted to ask real quick before the end is, could you talk about your kind of background and being the first behavior design major at Stanford? Because a lot of things we talk about, we usually talk about how people got into behavioral science, and there's often a lot of interesting career paths to get there. And I think yours is especially unique, and you kind of created your own college major. So if you want to do a quick rundown of that, that'd be a good backstory for our listeners, and then we'll kind of wrap it up.
Yeah, totally. So remember, I had this love for practical psych. I wanted to bridge it to the industry world and business world, but I didn't know how to. And I guess I was naive to think that, hey, college is this place where you get to learn whatever you wanted and take whatever classes, and there would be no more requirements. That was not true. But then I realized that, hey, at Stanford, you can design your own major. And I did. I asked BJ to kind of like be the faculty, lead sponsor for it. And they actually closed down the program of designing your own major in the humanities department, like after I left. I think maybe I was the last one. So thank you for keeping it alive while I was there. But it was a mixture of, the classes, BJ's classes, psych classes, computer science classes, philosophy classes. Essentially, education-wise, it was things that I was interested in, but practical-wise, the experience came in industry and working throughout college, and already consulting with, like a Fortune 500 company was the like first project that I ever worked on, but it was marketing B2B, and it wasn't super fulfilling. But then I quickly learned that, okay, like what can be fulfilling? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think we just wanted to know a little bit of the nuts and bolts, because people are always interested in how to get into behavioral science and how do they kind of forge their path. And like something that we find when talking to people is there's not one path. You, in a lot of ways, have to create it for yourself. And I think that's an awesome example of you're interested in it, you made it happen, and you created kind of your own program to get in. To it. And even, and given, kind of you said, I think even if they didn't give you the flexibility of creating a major, like you still would have gotten involved with BJ, taken all the appropriate classes, projects, and kind of like made your own curriculum outside of the actual classes too, which I think is kind of a key thing. You have to find the ways to learn it that are available to you and the ways to apply it, and just tackle those.
Yeah, and if I could project this back onto the swarm of bees, right, like model cloud, so many paths to get to that cloud of, if you want to be a behavioral, get into the behavioral science field, behavior design field. At the end of the day, right, and the behavioral scientists, behavior designers, etc., what are we saying that we can do? We're saying that with our processes, systems, methods, tools, technology, etc., we can help facilitate behavior change. We can help people do things that can lead to healthier and happier lives. Behavior change, getting people to take action. Like that's what we do ultimately. And for people that are trying to break in the field, do that, right? You can just go straight to actually helping people change behavior, and that can be your degree, that can be your case, those can be your case studies. That's what I would do if I didn't go on this path, is just go straight there.
That is excellent advice and a great place to wrap up, I think. So before we depart, let people know, I think, you provided a bunch of recommendations on links and stuff. We'll put those together and put those in kind of our post for the show. But, in general, how can people learn more about your work? How can they keep in touch with you? How should they reach out? Anything like that?
Yeah, email david@behaviordelta.com. You can check out the consulting firm website, behaviordelta.com, but also personally Instagram, breathe and go, NGO, breathe NGO, if you want to connect there. Thanks, y'all.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. This was awesome. A great start to the year, I must say. So maybe we'll do a follow-up episode at the end of the year and see how our behavior designs worked and what progress we made.
Fun. Yeah, good to see you both.
All right. Yeah. Thanks a lot, man. We will see you all and see everyone else soon.
See ya.
All right, see y'all. Bye.
Thank you for listening. That concludes this edition of Action Design Radio, hosted by Eric Johnson and Zarak Khan. All podcast episodes are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and many other platforms where you might typically get your pod on. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Special thanks to Morgan Bortz for design. And as always, we would like to recognize Steve Wendell, founder of the Action Design Network, a nonprofit organization dedicated to spreading awareness about behavioral economics, psychology, and all things behavioral science in order to help you improve your life, your career, and your understanding of the world around us and the people in it. I am your producer and audio engineer, Zach Simon. For more cutting-edge behavioral science content, visit action-design.org. Once again, that's action-design.org. There, you can sign up for our newsletter and find an in-person event happening near you. We have chapters in over a dozen cities in the United States and Canada. Also, on our website, you can find additional notes and links regarding the topics discussed in today's episode. Thank you again for tuning in, and we will see you again soon.